All right. Um, Now we're gonna go for our next speaker. Um, let's see. Our next speaker is Rotem. Rotem joined eyeo in 2015. His background is in new scalable collaborations that allow eyeo to successfully move its acceptable ads initiative forward. Rotem's current position at eyeo is in business development and puts him in charge of innovative partnerships. He's done a lot of thinking and a lot of action in terms of trying to find the balance between what's good for the users and what's good for a good web ecosystem as well. So without further ado, here's Rotem.
Hi everyone, I'm Shweta. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for joining my session. And today I'm going to talk about users, privacy, and the web economy. So without further ado, I will share my screen, and I hope that you can see it. Good, there we are. Users, privacy, and the web economy. During the session, I'll try to provide you with my own overview over the topic and what kind of developments I see in the field, and also some of my interpretations um, about what changes in privacy setups, how they may affect the web economy. Um, the presentation will be divided to mainly 4 sections. In one, I'm going to overview recent privacy developments that we all probably experienced over the last couple of years. Then we're going to talk about the previous battleground, which is the rise of ad blocking, and basically try to see whether we can identify similar patterns and whether those patterns can be applied also on this shift that we now see in privacy. Then I will address the topic of how the new privacy setup may affect the web economy and what are the implications of it. And at the end, I will try to offer a look to the future and basically try to anticipate what kind of changes we may see in the next few years. So, recent privacy developments, I'll do it very quickly because I would assume that the majority of the people attending this session, at least to some degree, are aware of these changes. Technically speaking, we can classify these changes into 3 different fields. One is regulation, another is technology or product development and launches, and then changes in user sentiments towards the topic. Regulations. These are the 2 more popular and well-known legislations related to privacy from recent years. One is GDPR, that is, of course, related to Europe, and the other one is CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And while there are many, many more, whether it's in India or Brazil or Canada or other states in the US, I think these are the 2 that were probably the most significant in the sense of setting the tone and changing the equilibrium of what users should expect when approaching the web. These changes definitely indicate that legislators see the topic of privacy as important and as a field that needs to be addressed in regulation and in the way that state provides users with tools to take control over the privacy. Technology and product. I guess we all have heard about changes in the Apple ecosystem, whether it's with the launch of iOS 14.5, or whether it's with changes that were done in Safari already 2 or 3 years ago, or even more. Of course, there are other notable products such as Firefox, and I will not mention all the list of products that did some user enablement in the field of privacy. But I would say these are the 2 that are more discussed in the public domain. Basically, when Apple take the topic of privacy and approach it as a market differentiator of what it provides to users, that's a great indication for the changes that we see in the field. Regarding privacy sandbox, that is basically is related to the changes done at the Chrome browsers. The launching of them were postponed in 2 years, but it's very clear that it's coming, and these delays are just to help the market be more ready for the changes, but it's clear that Chrome is going to be more private in comparison to the past also. User sentiment. I took 2 selected, easy to find researchers, but there are definitely several more. We definitely see a change in user sentiment when it comes to the importance that they give privacy. In a recent research done by Cisco, 86% of the survey respondents indicated that they care about the privacy. Most of them are willing to act if there was a tool that would have provided that in an easy way. Some of them even act. It's very similar to numbers that we have internally at eyeo in sense of what users expect. So we were not surprised about that. By the way, this survey was done among users from 12 countries. Another indication that this phenomenon has global characterization and not a local one. Another survey that was done by Pew Research Center shows more or less the same result among American users. Confusion, feeling out of control, have no transparency over how the data is being used. And the reason why it's not a surprise for most of the attendees of this session is because ad blockers were there first, already way before 2015, but I think this is the comment that may have put the stamp on the ability of users to protect their privacy better with ad blockers. That, of course, the quote from Edward Snowden on the topic that basically called for whomever wants an easy way to improve their privacy in the web is to use an ad blocker. So as said, we were in the previous battleground, which is the rise of ad blocking. Probably going to have a significant role too in this shift in the market, which is towards a more private web. I would like to look at the previous occurrences and try to see whether we can see some similar patterns and try to anticipate what kind of developments we may expect. Looking at ads today in comparison to previous years, especially if you think about a decade ago, the web looks nicer. And I'm not talking about the web with ad blockers, I'm talking about the web for everyone. The usage of ad blockers did a major shift in the market towards more importance towards the user experience. The result of having a very aggressive ad UX in the past brought users to implement ad blockers in masses. This graph is brought by the Page for Adblock report from 2021 and Blockful. Again, I guess most of you are familiar with the rise of ad blockers as a phenomenon. The result of that, which I will talk in the next slides, was a very steep change in user experience. There were 2 major developments that were caused by adoption of ad blockers by the masses. One of them is industry initiatives that were created to improve the user experience. One is eyeo's initiated acceptable ads program and then a launch of the Independent Acceptable Ads Committee, which is a committee that basically tries to set a standard for acceptable ads specifically. So with more focus on the ad blocking community. Another one, which is more related to the general audience, which is Coalition for Better Ads, basically an attempt of Google and other market players to set guidelines on how ads should look like in an attempt to mitigate the bad user experience that was there a decade ago. Yeah, another trend that took place as a result of the rise of ad blocking is the rise of subscriptions. This is just an example of pretty famous websites that have a subscription model that requires users basically to pay directly for the content they consume. It has some upsides, for example, the fact that these publications are less dependent on the interest of sponsors. On the other end, of course, it also raised the bar when it comes to the masses in the ability to consume content. It's more expensive. Not everybody can afford it. Remember this slide because I will address it again. Yeah. The point is that when users were provided with tangible tools to assert their choice, the web economy had to change as a result and come towards the user. Now the question is whether we're going to see similar patterns, whether the introduction of more easy tools to protect your privacy and the rise in awareness to the topic may also bring us more privacy tools, more adoption of them, more users to try to act actively to protect their privacy, and as a result, a shift in the web economy. Yeah, so as I said, there will be changes in the landscape of privacy. They are going to have implications. It sounds pretty self-explanatory. Whether more privacy would actually be a better web. I would like to, well, I'm sure it is. I would like to look at two specific implications of it and try to bring some more light on the topic. Firstly, privacy. We don't have enough time to dive too deep into what privacy means and how important it is. So I'll just say briefly that it's seen as a basic human right that is instrumental for the existence of functional democratic society. It's pretty simple. The more autonomy of thought we have, the more fear we have from feedback from society, the more enabled we are to create our own original thought and to act more freely. Again, pretty self-explanatory. There is a lot of literature on the topic, and if any of you would like me to share, I can definitely provide more after the session. Yes, two less spoken aspects of the changes towards privacy is the price and the competition and content agents consolidation, which I will talk about in the next slides. One aspect that I would like to highlight is the cost of privacy. Usually, the ability of having more privacy requires more resources, whether it's server costs, whether it's just the development of products, and sometimes just the positioning of premium products. For example, the Apple ecosystem, which is obviously the more expensive products in the market in the field. There is some wrong message in the fact that to reach more privacy, you actually have to spend more money. On the other end, I wouldn't say it's a too strong argument because at least now users have more ability to protect their privacy. For those that are really interested in that, still, if you want to create a society with more privacy, of course, it's an aspect we have to take in consideration. The second thing is the aspect of competition and content consolidation. I pack them together because I think they're very related. This graph that was posted by the Financial Times just recently offers an observation of the changes in the market reach inside of the App Store. Apple introduced privacy changes in its ecosystem. during April 2021. And as you can see, its market share within the App Store has doubled. Firstly, because it's their platform, it's their first-party data in many cases, and they know best how to use the data that is in their hands. But it's pretty clear that this maneuver changed the balance of powers in the billions worth ecosystem, and it's just a sign of what can these changes mean. Another aspect that can imply for it is the glorification of first-party data. Obviously, when we close the funnel for third parties to benefit and harvest users' data, the result is more leverage for first-party data, whether it's within the websites, whether it's in platforms, and that, of course, brings them to the front and helps them to create more successful businesses. As an indication for that, every consultancy related to advertising in the world would now pitch you that you need to invest in your first-party data set and try to create a strategy based on it. I'm not getting into the question whether first-party is always first-party and whether they actually follow that or looking for loopholes, because I can talk about it probably for a whole hour. But the point is that it's clear that the emphasis is turning into the first party aspect of the data industry. And in the next slide, I'm going to say something that some of you may see controversial. It's factually right, 100% factually right. The parties that hold the most first party data in the web is Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, probably some others that I didn't mention, but definitely the strongest parties in the web that are very significant players, if not the most significant players in their field. They're all great companies who created good products and very justly are leading companies in their field. And with that said, it's pretty clear that if they already have market dominance that is tremendous and remarkable, the more glorification of first-party data, the more power these companies may have in the future, and the more control and influence over the web economy. In other words, what we're saying, the bigger you are, the more valuable your data for online advertising is. Most of the monetization of the web economy is done throughout online advertising. And while glorifying first-party data, we're basically setting the bar higher for small independent content agents to remain or to be launched. The result of that, of course, is that as someone with a blog or just a smaller news website or just a new player, it's going to be harder to penetrate the market, and there will be more dependency over using platforms. It would probably going to cause consolidation because, as we said, size plays a role, and that also means that it can limit the amount of independence that content agents may have. In other words, and to recap this topic, privacy is a very important human right, and it's one of the foundations of democratic societies. Freedom of speech too, and free press is very important for democratic society too. And I think we have to take in consideration that when we do changes, we have to account all of the aspects to make sure that we are not glorifying one aspect of the web over another. Do I say that privacy shouldn't be important? Absolutely not. I think that we should keep investing, providing users with more privacy, and try to do it in a responsible way that offers users with more abilities, but also keep the value exchange of the web to have a sustainable web. We're getting to the fourth part of my presentation: privacy and ad blockers. can we be agents of change? In this part, I would like to offer my interpretation of the field and maybe some wishful thinking about what I would like to see in the future. Ad blockers from the beginning were, in a way, a sort of extension to the user agent. They helped users with functioning as means to negotiate with other peers of the web what are their expectations, how they would like to be addressed, and what is their desires regarding how to be treated. It empowered users by providing a tangible tool that allowed users to protect their rights. And for me in core, that's the most important role of ad blockers that can be applied to other fields too. What I want to offer as an observation or maybe as a direction of thought is the question whether we can extend the scope of ad blockers based on our core philosophy to new fields and try to offer users with better tools for the future of the web, considering all the challenges and the opportunities that are introduced on basically a daily basis. Optional developments that I see as part of this trend is maybe more affordable, user-friendly privacy tools that would enable users to protect their privacy in easier ways. It's not a secret that at the moment privacy tools are either expensive or just not that easy to set. Definitely not for the majority of users. I'm sure that there will be a lot of changes in that field. A non-binary approach towards blocking, kind of similar to the same philosophy that the Adblock Plus is an Adblock acceptable ads program, and other ad blockers, of course, contains. Basically, the idea that we focus on the aspects that are most important, but trying to keep the value exchange of the web sustainable, so content would still be able to be funded in ways that are not only direct monetization throughout payment. Another aspect that I think that requires more thought is the fact that with more privacy and more anonymization, naturally, there's more anonymized data available to the web that can be used, again, to restore the value exchange in the web. There would probably be new commercial models and new offerings. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that this is an open call for innovation. Whether with us, whether separately, we are pretty excited or very excited about what the future holds regarding this field, and definitely call for all the participants in this industry of ad blockers to go beyond and above and try to offer users new tools. Yeah, to summarize my session, and just to touch base on the things I've said, privacy is the next king or the new king, depends how you look at it. It's definitely here to stay. We should try to learn from the past about the phenomena that we've witnessed and see whether we can anticipate as a result of that what the future holds. Privacy is important, so does other things. We need to look at things holistically and try to see whether the future that we provide to users is the future that we want to see. And our industry definitely has a lot to say about this topic and definitely can be proactive and engage in more spaces, whether it's discussion W3C on the topic, whether it's other industry initiatives, and see if we can provide users with new offerings. Yeah, and we've got, I think, 6 minutes for questions.
Great, thanks, Rotem. Yeah, and it's really fascinating, the whole landscape and all the discussion happening around this topic. We have some time for questions. In case people want to ask some questions, they can also put it in the questions section in the event platform. But I had a few. One of the things that you mentioned was about the rise in subscriptions, right? Um, how will the rise of subscriptions affect content and also the demographics of content consumption, in your opinion?
I think there's some clear aspect, which is the fact that you need money to actually consume the web, unlike what was more common before, which is that content is free. It has some good sides too, as I said, the fact that as a publication, you are less dependent on sponsors and can have more independent direction. On the other side, of course, that from our point of view, we would like content to be free and available for all. And that was the engine that was at the base of the internet uh, until I would say now, and hopefully also in the future. Um, on another aspect of it is that not every content is produced by the New York Times, and not all publishers are able to do that. And if ads no longer pays a role for them, or not as much as it was in the past, then the result of that, and I mean that neither ads or subscription work for them, is that they, as I said, may consolidate into other companies or disappear.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating. That's something that I sort of like think about as well, which is, yeah, if all the quality content is locked behind paywalls, the stuff left, how does it affect society, right? It is going to be, it's an open question. It's a fascinating question for us to see. We can see the effects of it even right now, right?
I
Um,
mean, if you think about it, another thing that may happen is the launching of platforms that would host the content, and basically that's kind of a trick to change the equilibrium, pushing first-party data to the platform. And that also have some negative aspects, for example, the influence that those platforms may have on the content, the fact that the content providers would have to also comply with um, with policies of these platforms, etc., etc. And yeah, pros and cons. Not sure what's better in that sense.
yeah, I had another question. I wanted to get your view on, which is when it comes to the topic of privacy, everyone has strong opinions, which is good, right? Um, at the same time, people sometimes I think are thinking quite in binaries, and I wanted to ask your question. I ask this question to you, which is, do you see privacy as a binary thing? Either it's there or it's not, or do you see it more as a spectrum and various shades of that?
I definitely see it as a spectrum. Firstly, I didn't address it in my session, but if you dive a bit deeper into the questionnaires, the user point of view changes when it comes to anonymized data or different characteristics that are seen as less personal. Um, and I think at the end of the day, we would like users to have a choice on how to consume the web. There are definitely users who wouldn't like to share any sort of data and would like to benefit content by direct payment, and that's fine. But I think it's important to facilitate the web uh, for everyone, and that users would have more granular access to the web. And if I don't care about my privacy, I think in my perspective it's a mistake. But if I don't care about my privacy at all, and I still would like to consume content, that's also fine, and arguably needs to be facilitated in this way or another. And of course, there should be some middle ground that should fit the majority of people.
All right. Um, we have time for maybe just one question, which is, do you think it's possible to decouple ads with tracking and still maintain a sustainable monetization for the web?
You mean ads without tracking or with less
Uh,
tracking? You understand the question?
without or less? That's what I see as the upvoted questions. I'm just asking you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some amount of measurement would always be needed. That's just the nature of it, because as a marketer, you're not able to really like track what you're doing. Otherwise, the lack of it may cause decrease in the value of the web economy because marketers would simply go to channels where they can measure it. Of course, to some degree, I don't think it's binary. So some sort of enablement needed. Whether it needs to be micro-targeting as we got used to, probably not. There will be some middle way.
All right. Thanks, Rotem. And now it's time for our next talk. Bye-bye.